Okie dokie. No-go gauge in. Strip bolt forward. Locked up. There you have it. No-go gauge again. In. Guys closed. There we go. There's our reading. And of course our final headspace here. Field gauge is in. Ride the carrier forward. We're going to go ahead and hook it up. We're in kilograms. And we're just going to pull on this sucker. $20 kilograms. Does not close. Alrighty everybody, so as you saw, the headspace is still good on the Visca, which means that we can go to our 1500 round approximately debrief from the testing in the previous video. So what you'll see on screen right now is it looks like the locking lugs on the bolt are being polished up nicely, both on the primary and secondary, which is actually a little bit surprising to me because it looks to me like the bolt face itself is getting a little bit chewed up from the base of the cartridges, which may indicate that it's a bit soft. The rest of the surfaces of the bolt appear to be in pretty good condition, with some pretty heavy polishing occurring in some areas. Both the locking lugs on the trunnion appear to be good, with no dimpling or deformation on the main locking faces of the parts. However, I will note that it looks like there was a little bit of flattening of one of the corners on the secondary locking lug. We do have some impact polishing on both stop surfaces of both the carrier and the trunnion, which is to be expected through heavy use. What we need to do is over time measure this so that we know if this is turning into peening. I will note that the burr that we mentioned at the beginning of the video on the carrier rail on the right side has progressed into some deformation. We'll have to monitor this over time to determine if it's causing an issue. It does not look super serious, it just has progressed a little bit. We have some peening occurring between the carrier tail and the hammer. These parts are designed to run into each other and give a little bit. It's not super serious at this point, but you can hook a fingernail on it. Now what I will say that we need to keep an eye on is there is some interaction between the carrier and the rear trunnion that we need to keep an eye on. It does look like they are running into each other, which may be an indication of overgassing of the gun. So when we look at the hammer, we are immediately drawn to a large gash in the spine of the hammer, but that is not as concerning to me as the line below that. And this is actually where the carrier is running into, the actual carrier body is running into the hammer, and this could cause the carrier itself to deform there and perhaps lock up the bolt, and this could potentially, if it progresses, render the firearm inoperable. There is some random scuffing on some of the internals, which is to be expected. I mean, these guns are designed to move metal. I don't see anything that's causing deformation, it's more of a polishing. The piston head doesn't really show any appreciable wear, and the staking is still good on the piston. There are a few things, however, that I would like to note. I don't have a good picture from before the test, but it does look to me like the right leaf of the hammer spring has flexed a little bit. Again, this could have been like this from the factory, but I didn't have a good picture of it, so I can't say for sure. It just does look a little bit out of sorts to me. I want to point out that there is a prolific polishing of the right side of the receiver where the charging handle part of the carrier actually runs through. This isn't a big problem or anything, it's just a cool thing to note that it is indeed running through there, and I can see my reflection in the metal of the receiver. The last thing that I would like to note is that finish idiosyncrasy that we mentioned in the original video has sort of come home to roost, if you will, because the entire front half of the gun appears to not have taken well to the heat. We definitely have some prolific greening, if you will, of the metal of the barrel and the gas block. The other thing I want to point out real quick is this is a C39V2, and that dust cover looks like it's right at home on there. Externally speaking, all the rivets look good. I'm not going to bore you guys with more pictures of those. Know that I have taken pictures of them, so if we see something later in the test, we can go back and look and compare them to the point at 1500, but really there's nothing really to look at except for some rivets. Alrighty, everybody, on to the Dykem test. And anybody who's not familiar with the Dykem test, it's a test that I use to basically assess how the bolt and trunnion are playing nice together. And this is a visual indicating test that gives me an idea of how the stresses are being loaded between the four parts. And what we would like to see is an absolute balance between all four parts, the primary and secondary locking lugs on both the bolt and the trunnion. However, it is acceptable if we have excess loading of stress on the primary locking lug, never on the secondary. Well, when we started the test, if you remember, we had a slight imbalance, not really a cause for concern, but a slight imbalance towards the secondary locking lug. I am happy to report that it looks as though we've had a rebalance and perhaps even a reloading of some of that excess stress towards the primary locking lug. If we saw an excess loading of force towards the secondary locking lug, then that would be a cause for concern and something that we would have to watch over time, because that's a prime indicator that the gun is going to eventually lose headspace. But we don't see that in this case, so the prognosis, at least in my mind, for the test going forward is in pretty good standing thus far. On to the test matrix, guys. Well, you can see it up on screen right now, and you can see that we fired 1,580 rounds with magazine 37 being a short magazine containing only 20 rounds of ammunition, and of course the other tests that we've used ammunition for up to this point. We had 3 malfunctions. The first was user-induced by moi, and it was basically a bump fire situation where the hammer followed the carrier down, did not impact the primer, and did not set the round off. We put it right back into a magazine later in the test, and it went off just fine. The second one was actually a weird double feed situation. It was a magazine failure of some kind where 2 live rounds tried to occupy the same space, got crushed between the trunnion and the carrier. This gun is not zeroed at all. Uh-oh. Right next to it, inline cartridge. It's not even a piece of brass. I mean, it's got one going in. It's like 2 came out. So two
rounds came out of the magazine.
One's going in, and one is just overcorrected and is trying to come out. The third one was actually a slam fire event, which is they happen from time to time, especially when we're talking about AKs. 7.62x39 ammunition is a little less stable, if you will, than the American counterpart. However, I will point out that it is a serious thing that we need to pay attention to. And it's not the first time that it has been pictured on a VSKA test of this nature before. Ooh, did you hear that? Alrighty, guys, so that's all I have on my debrief between the 0 and 1,500 round mark. The next test will recommence at the range, and we're going to try and push it past 3,000 rounds. So be sure to be subbed up. Bring all your friends in the fold here at the VSO Gun Channel. We'll see you guys at the range pushing to 3,000.